All right, excited to get into some manual flight function with the Mavic 2 Enterprise series. Finally getting in the drone in the air, able to look at some camera settings and some of the different options we have with the Pilot app. We'll start off here just kind of covering some items that are pertinent to both the Mavic 2 Enterprise series, the Dual, and the Zoom, and also pertinent to just DJI Pilot as a whole. You can see aircraft status after takeoff here in the top left there in flight, GPS, as we covered in some previous videos. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is some of the settings here in the menu above the camera shutter and the toggle to change between photo and video mode. When you open that menu, it's going to go ahead and turn blue. And the first item here is histogram, which is a toggle you can turn on and off, and that turns on this histogram. And this ultimately allows you to see if the image is underexposed or overexposed. Ideally, the hill showing your exposure is going to be in the middle. If it's on the right side, as you can see in this photo, slightly overexposed. If it's on the left side, it's underexposed. And that's kind of just general rule of thumb in this case. We see on the left side here is underexposed. On the right side there, overexposed. Moving down the settings here, you can add a timestamp, and this adds a timestamp onto non-IR video and photos. So visible photos and video from, speaking of the Mavic 2 Enterprise series specifically, Zoom and Dual, and that includes location, date, and time. Example photo here after the fact, you can see in the top left, tags it with the date, time, GPS location. Video caption adds an SRT file in addition to the video recording, and that documents metadata during recording of the video. Different applications and programs you can do stuff with the SRT file, but you can see the drone's location during different time codes of the video and camera settings as well, altitude of the drone, the yaw, pitch, roll, etc. So good information there if useful to you. Frame arm LEDs off automatically during shooting, setting I just leave on personally. The grid is in regards to the visual display, not the photos and videos that are taken, but it's going to be useful if you're looking at perhaps rule of thirds on the photography side, centering something in the middle, or if you're communicating with a team member and maybe displaying the drone feed, you could say a certain box, a certain quadrant is where what you're trying to call out is located. So you can see the grid lines here, divides it into the 9 sections. And you can also do grids plus diagonals, so that intercept in the middle would show the center point. File index mode here, 2 options, reset and continuous. Reset, it's going to reset the photo to DJI underscore 0001 every time the drone is powered up. And continuous, it's going to keep going up to 999 and then go ahead and start a new folder. Default is continuous, and that's what I personally use majority of the time. Storage location here on the Mavic 2 Enterprise series, you can put an SD card in or just use the internal storage. Also shows the storage space left, but here's where you'd select which of these storage options you would want to use. Obviously, if there's only one, it's going to use the default. Reset camera settings. If there's something a little bit off with your camera settings and you're having trouble getting it back to quality settings, just probably easiest to reset them. And then you can go ahead and format internal storage, which will go ahead and clear all photos and videos. Would also have that option for the SD card as well. We had one in the aircraft at this point. And going ahead and formatting that is going to format the card if it's not the format for the aircraft that you need. And it also clears all photos and videos from the SD card. Moving into some specifics for the Mavic 2 Enterprise series Zoom interface. So camera settings here, you can pop up with the 3-bar menu that is under the playback button and the shutter button. See that turns blue when we've selected it. And then we have the option with the zoom camera for auto or manual. With auto, we can adjust the exposure value. If we decrease that, it's going to darken the photo. If we increase that, it will brighten the photo. So you can see exposure value has been decreased here. And we can also increase it. Moving back a slide here, auto exposure lock, you can turn that on and it will not change the exposure from the current setting. Moving the camera settings over to manual here, this allows the adjustment of ISO and shutter. And something just to remember here, you don't want to bring that ISO up too high or the photo quality will be degraded. But perhaps in a live type situation, you would need to increase the ISO. You have the option for manual focus, autofocus continuous, or as we'll talk about later, just autofocus. Now with autofocus continuous, whenever we move the gimbal itself, it'll autofocus for that new area. Manual focus, you manually control the focus by dragging it up and down, either towards the infinity symbol or the flower. So we're going to have this bar in this position. When something's farther away, the flower would be something closer away where we'd go down. This could be useful in inspection scenarios where the camera is auto-focusing on something that you're not necessarily trying to get the picture of. So taking over control and adjusting manual focus can be quite useful. Zoom here, click on the button to open the zoom menu, 2x optical, 3x digital. So you zoom in here 6 times. You can also adjust the zoom with the right wheel on the controller. In the menu here, circling back to some zoom specific settings. First one being the photo modes. Single shot would be default, just taking a picture. Burst mode, it's going to rapidly take 3, 5, or 7 photos. AEB stands for auto exposure bracketing. It's going to take multiple pictures with different exposures. And after the fact, you could stitch those together to make quite cool image, more or less. Interval, it'll keep taking a photo every 2 seconds, for example. We click on the interval and select a certain time there for the camera to consistently trigger. HDR stands for high dynamic range. It's the same idea as AEB, except it's going to pull the photos together into one. So not as much manual control after the fact with HDR, but doesn't involve the work to create the photo after the fact that the AEB does. Hyperlight allows you to shoot images in low light areas with reduced noise. And then at the bottom of the settings here, I want to talk about panorama as well. I think this one's easiest to show through a couple videos. We'll go ahead and select panorama. There's vertical, which you can see right now, horizontal, which is horizontal, sphere, and 180. So when you switch those over, you'll kind of see on the photo button what they are. Just click the photo button to start, and it's automatically going to take those pictures. And then after the photos are taken, it will go ahead and create the panorama. So we can see here another video example. It's finishing up creating the panorama. You can go ahead and click on the playback button under the shutter button there. It'll load the preview up. You can click on one of the panoramas that was taken. And you can see it's cool visually, but it also has some good use cases in industry, seen with California wildfires, being able to document an area where unfortunately a neighborhood was affected or a roadway. And even on the inspection side with a string of power lines, just wanting to have a quick documentation of an area. You have the ability to control image ratio. So 4:3 is going to be the bigger image here, 16:9, the smaller image. 4:3 gives you a few more pixels there. So my default, usually on the inspection side. Image format here, shoot RAW, JPEG, or JPEG and RAW. JPEG is what you're going to be able to open in your typical photo viewer. RAW would be if you're trying to make some significant edits to the photo after the fact. can also shoot both when you trigger a photo. White balance, you can leave this on auto or create customs. As you can see here, custom setting, the white balance is a little bit different. Situation where you want to use custom white balance would be mapping, because you don't want different white balance for different photos. So selecting this on custom would keep a consistent white balance throughout the mission. Moving over now to the video side, we're able to change our video size. Right now it's 40K, 30 frames per second. Can adjust that. Video format, MP4 or MOV, and then white balance as well. Can adjust that within this menu. Few settings as we go over to the wrench here in the menu specific to the Enterprise Zoom. Lock gimbal while shooting, so if we're taking photo, it's going to go ahead and lock the gimbal. AFC stands for autofocus continuous, so just leave that on for the camera to consistently autofocus, or you can just have the option be autofocus non-continuous. We talked about grid, frame over LEDs, anti-flicker. Probably just leave that on auto, to be quite honest, but you'd want to make sure that's on if you're in a room with fluorescent lights, or you plan on shooting a television screen or something like that. So maybe there's a big billboard that you're shooting that's electronic. APAS stands for Advanced Pilot Assistance System. So you can click the button on the top left to enable that. And then first time safety warning is going to pop up and just let you know that when it's enabled, the aircraft will attempt to automatically avoid obstacles when flying forward and backwards with the remote controller. So we'll show it in the next video here. But when an object is detected in this video, I'm just pushing the right stick forward and the drone is automatically flying over the bush that was in the way. One more time there. And you can see obstacle map that we talked about before, and distance as well. Moving into the dual series interface. In the top middle here, as we have different camera views, you can see the current camera view in the lime green. You'd switch over to one of the other views, MSX or IR, by clicking on the button on the left side. You can do a single tap on the screen for exposure to a certain area. Or we can go ahead and open up the visual camera settings, as we talked about before with the zoom, and adjust that exposure value. So you can see here, by increasing the exposure value, all of a sudden you can see me hanging out in the shadow there. Something to note though, there is no manual settings here with the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, but by adjusting exposure value, the ISO and shutter are going to be adjusted as well. And no manual settings here, because ultimately it doesn't really give you much more control. You can kind of max out your camera settings with the exposure value. And then also with manual camera settings, that's going to be a different problem when we're looking at the MSX view. So ultimately, auto camera settings here leads to the best results overall. Top right here, once again, opens the on-screen zoom option, going from 1 to 4 times. This was with the latest Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual update with the Android version of the Pilot app. So you can see 4 times, 1 time. And you can also use the right wheel on the controller to zoom if you don't want to tap and drag on the screen. Moving into the menu here, and adjust photo mode. Image format is just JPEG here with the Enterprise Dual. Some of the specific photo modes though, single shot, something to note. If you don't just turn on the drone, you don't adjust MSX or have previously adjusted MSX, it would leave you with a low-res visual photo from the MSX. But if you've gone ahead and adjusted your MSX or your thermal, you'll get the visual and the MSX or thermal photo. And then same idea with video, you're getting your visual and thermal / MSX video. If you're on visual video mode, it's just going to default to MSX or thermal view based on the last settings that was used with your camera view. And then specifically here, moving down, you also have the panorama mode we talked about, interval, triggering a photo every X number of seconds, and burst mode, at taking the photos rapidly in a row. Video-wise, once again, can change video format, MP4, MOV, video size for both the thermal and visible camera as well. And now switching over to our IR camera view, press the button on the left side here. First item we want to get into here would be the color palette. So this information from our thermal camera displayed on screen is transferred and viewed by us with a specific color palette. So you can see in the top left here, hot spot, if it's hot, it's going to be red, cold, going to be black. So the right side of the roof, red, is hotter, the sun is shining on it, and the left side, the other side of the roof, is black as it is cold. You can see a little heat signature on me standing next to the building as well. But so, circulating through a few of these other color palettes, we can look at rainbow, gray, hot metal, cold spot. Important to play around with these, use them during training, and figure out which one is really best for your application. Or sometimes, even in the field, in a scenario, could be useful to switch between different palettes and see if something different is showing up for you, because based on temperature range, it's going to show up as something different. Isotherms gives you the ability to highlight a specific temperature range with the color palettes we just spoke of. So it's useful to help items at certain temperature ranges stand out. You can turn this on or off within the application. So you can see first we're going to open the bottom menu, then we're going to select isotherms, then we turn it on, and then can adjust the temperature range. So here's a quick comparison showing isotherms on and off. On the left side here, isotherms turned on and set to a range of 59 to 82 degrees. So you can see all of a sudden the roof and the shadow that we don't necessarily care about in this scenario are not part of our display here anymore and are not being highlighted with the color palette. If we turn the isotherms off, you can see there is enough temperature difference there where you can still see the human shape then gets the door, but it is a lot easier with the isotherms turned on. So something to be careful of where you don't necessarily want to wash something out with isotherms that you're looking at or for, but if you know specific temperature range, margin of error, and other factors, can be a useful setting to enable and work with. Temperature measurement tools, just hit what looks like the temperature with the line through it, so that would be no temperature measurement to open up this menu. And then you can select temperature area measurement or temperature spot measurement. First off, the area measurement draws a rectangle on the screen, and the top left, we can expand the temperature area to full screen. Top right, we would exit. Bottom right, we'd adjust the size of the temperature area rectangle. And then here on the bottom within the box, we can see the max temperature, 82.6 degrees Fahrenheit, the minimum temperature, 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit on top of that fan, and then the average temperature which within the temperature area measurement. You can also then go to Menu, once again click on the wrench, and then a setting specifically for the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual here is Temperature Alert. So click on that menu and then can enable Temperature Alert and do a specific alert threshold. And then if you're flying the drone and there is a temperature within the area measurement that is above the temperature alert, there's going to be an audio alarm that goes off on the mobile device / remote controller notifying you of. Key thing to remember here, temperature alert is only working if area measurement is enabled, and it's only going to go off if that excessive temperature is within the area measurement that is on the screen. You can make that full screen if you want to cover the full screen, but it's also can be useful on inspection side of things to limit it to a certain part of the screen, or in a search and rescue situation where you're just looking for that temperature alert in a certain part. So when you pitch the gimbal angle, you can keep other excessive temperatures out of the picture. FFC stands for Flat Field Correction, and that would be for an offset calibration to compensate for errors that may build up with the thermal camera. Within, once again, our wrench menu here, you can just have that as auto, or you can manually trigger a FFC by clicking the button if your temperature readings and information is seeming a bit off within the application. Moving down that menu, you also have the option for ROI, and that basically allows us to exclude the sky from the picture. So you can see full versus sky excluded. We have a lot more detail here when we take the color palette that we're displaying in the information and exclude it from that top portion. So if you're flying with part of the sky in your photo, you want to go ahead and enable ROI either at 33% or 50% there. Gain mode, if we're looking at something at a higher temperature, want the high setting. Low temperature, I'm sorry, that's actually a bit backwards, but high gain mode is for something like a person or something at a lower temperature value. The low gain mode is something for a higher temperature value, such as a fire. But you can just leave it as auto, and then the temperature range will be automatically selected. For some reason you're having some issues with here, you could come into the settings and manually select it. And then circling back to our temperature area measurement, moving down to the spot measurement, when that is turned on, you can just tap anywhere on the screen to get a temperature reading. If you want to turn it off, you could just hit that temperature area measurement menu again and go back to the thermometer with the line through it. But moving on to MSX here, so we can see now we have IR invisible as our camera views we could switch to on the left side, and MSX in that lime green on the top here. But MSX is a FLIR trademark technology and allows you to see details such as writing or outlines of people, of writing, of, in this situation, the roof. So you can see these individual roof tiles. So items that before were the same temperature and just showed up as one color, when you enable MSX, it allows us to see a lot more finite details. And with the MSX, we can adjust the fusion by hitting these two squares within the button here on the top right, and that picks up a slider here for us to adjust. So when we pop open that menu, low fusion with the value at the bottom, we can see we have much more visible camera blended in here. And on the right with high fusion and that slider all the way up, we have a lot more IR into the live feed or any photos and videos that you would be taking. So this can be really useful for situational awareness as the pilot, and then also if you're needing to see more finite details of the IR view. If you're having an issue with the thermal invisible camera not being matched up correctly, so for example here, we have, the cold reading is on top of the fan here, but if it was moved over to the left, so you can see that's where it actually should be. And granted, I did make an offset adjustment, so it was off. But if this was the camera view you were seeing, you'd want to come in here to the offset adjustment and align your visible and thermal camera together as they're both being blended into MSX. So you can move it up, down, left, right, etc. With these settings. So you can see it is off, and we have adjusted it properly now. Last thing here, just the Mavic 2 Enterprise series attachments. First one being the speaker. Pop open the menu there by hitting the speaker button in that main menu. You can do an instant broadcast. All you got to do is just press on the tap to talk, and then you'd stop that, circling back to that one more time, tap, say your message, and then when you stop, it's going to be broadcasted. So you'd speak, and then it would be broadcasted. You can also play local audio that you have saved on the mobile device / remote controller, have the theme song loaded up, and you could also adjust the speaker volume. If you want to record an audio message that you would like to be saved as local audio for repeated playing, you'd go into the menu, the gear setting, add audio, and then you could record audio or upload audio from an SD card, mobile device storage, etc. And then after that, once again, you can adjust volume in here as well, or play a pre-recorded message. For the spotlight, Fairly simple. We can turn it on and off here in the main menu in the top left. We can also go into our gear settings, spotlight settings here, and that's where we'd adjust the specific brightness of the spotlight. When the aircraft is idle, the max brightness is reduced to 50%. And then finally, the beacon. Pretty simple on this one. The FAA compliant beacon, if you're being able to fly at night with a daylight waiver, or just even during the day, can help with aircraft visibility. Just here on the main menu, go ahead and click that. The beacon starts. Click it again, the beacon will stop. So that kind of cover things for manual flight functions with some Pilot app / Mavic 2 Enterprise overall, and then also specifically with both systems. So hope that helps. Thanks.